Straight to our top story, and the EU, G7, and Australia have agreed to a $60 price cap on Russian oil. The move will limit the price countries can pay for Russian crude transported by sea and is set to come into effect sometime on Monday. Ukraine has welcomed the news, though they say they'd like to see the measure go even farther to just $30 a barrel. Meanwhile, Russia says it will not accept a price cap and will not supply oil to any countries that implement the cap. For more on this, we can cross to Moscow, where France 24's correspondent Daniel Hawkins is standing by. Daniel, as we've been reporting, Moscow has rejected any price caps and says it's analyzing the situation. What are Russia's options at this point? Are there any loopholes it can exploit?
Well, absolutely. That's exactly what the Russian government is going to be trying to be doing to get around these new sanctions. Of course, a $60 cap, in reality, as a lot of analysts have said, isn't going to have much of an impact directly by itself on Russia's finances, because Russian oil is selling currently for below that anyway. And much of Russia's oil exports to India, to China, are selling with a huge discounts on around 20, give or take, dollars per barrel. So that's a huge amount less as things stand already. Moscow needs a price of oil per barrel to be around $60 to $70 to get the so-called fiscal break-even point. And the production costs are, of course, around $30 to $40. So a much lower cap is going to be needed to affect Russia significantly. Now, what Russia is going to be trying to doing alongside China and India is probably to set up their own insurance companies to give companies and countries and clients options to buy their oil. They could also be trying to use a so-called dark fleet, which is basically a fleet of ships, of oil tankers, either not registered or with sort of complex registration histories to try to get around tankers, or to mix and transfer oil of a similar quality to hide where it's come from to start with. But either way, of course, this is going to make life more difficult for Russia. It's going to make exporting oil more costly, more time consuming, and for buyers of Russian oil, of course, to be fraught with secondary sanctions and risks as well. Don't forget, OPEC, of course, is also meeting tomorrow. They're going to be discussing potentially further output production cuts, although some analysts are saying prices are going to hold steady. So that is also something to bear in mind as to the effectiveness of these sanctions. But either way, really, the Kremlin has said they're not concerned. This is going to be business as usual.
Now, as you mentioned there, it's taken a while for the EU to negotiate this price cap. How likely is the new price cap to be effective, since the previous sanctions that Western powers put on Russian oil have appeared to have had a limited impact?
Well, Russia's position on the price cap has been very consistent from the start, and it's been reiterated today. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov saying Russia's not going to accept a price cap, and Russia's prepared for this. They've made preparations for this measure, which has been, of course, weeks and even months in discussion. Mikhail Usyanov, Moscow's ambassador to international organizations in Vienna, has also said Russia isn't going to supply oil to countries that implement that cap. Russia, of course, since sanctions began, has become India's top oil supplier. They've knocked Saudi Arabia and Iraq off top spot. They've increased exports significantly to China. Sri Lanka is another country that have said they could be forced to buy more Russian oil in the future. And just on Thursday, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that, I quote, "We don't care what the price cap will be. We'll negotiate with our partners directly." That was also echoed by the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, who said this is an anti-Russian measure and the repercussions are going to be felt for everyone. It's worth noting that both sides here are trying to effectively portray the situation as damaging for the rest of the world. So Janet Yellen, US Treasury Secretary, has said that this cap will be good for poor middle-income countries. Similar arguments have been echoed by Russia, the Russian embassy in the US saying that this is a dangerous move. This is going to destabilize world oil markets. This is an anti-market measure to start with. So both sides here are saying, or well, rather one side is saying this measure is countries. Russia's saying this is going to ruin the situation for everyone. It's a very dangerous measure. So far, really, this is a game of chess between the EU and its UK and US allies against the Kremlin. So far, the Kremlin really appears to be winning this because they found other significant oil markets for their exports. Just how much of an impact this is going to have will be seen in the coming weeks and months, and of course, following that OPEC meeting coming up tomorrow.
Daniel, thanks so much. We're going to have to leave it there. That's Daniel Hawkins, France 24's correspondent in Moscow.